I don't have any slides.
Okay.
All right, good morning, Labrador. It's a real pleasure to be here. It's traditional, starting off a speech like this, to thank the organizers. So I'd like to do that. I think this is a fantastic conference. I had the opportunity to raise my hand as someone who has been here before. I will say this conference gets better and better, and it really is a shining star. But I'd like to sort of pull another thread on that. The organizers, although you might not tell it from the professionalism of the conference, are not professional conference organizers. In addition to organizing sort of the past couple of days that I hope all of you have found as engaging and fascinating as I have, they run an organization that sits at the front line of one of the major contests in the world. They are literally the frontline defenders on the front line of cyberspace, of Europe, of the West. The fact that they can take the time to bring us together for these kinds of conversations, I genuinely salute. It is incredibly impressive. I thought for my comments today, I'd talk about a couple of things. First of all, in Canada, we had our own sort of seminal event in cyber just last week today. We stood up the Canadian Armed Forces Cyber Command, of which I have the pleasure of being the commander. I'll talk a little bit about why we stood up a cyber command, what it means, and what it means for us here. I'd then like to deep dive a little bit into the relationship that we have with CERT.LV, and one of the reasons why I'm so impressed. And I'd like to unpack a few of the key lessons that we've taken. For that, I'll actually harken back to the last time I was offered the opportunity to take this stage. And then I'll wrap up with a little bit of a discussion of sort of what we've done with some of those lessons, in particular in the Indo-Pacific region. But I will aim to do that quite quickly. I have learned from previous presenters on the stage that the questions from the audience are both fascinating and deep, and I will attempt to guard some time in order to take those questions, rather than take up the time of a very long-standing friend and colleague who follows me on the stage next. So Cyber Command. Canadian Armed Forces has been active in operating in the cyber environment for quite some time. Indeed, about 25 years ago, we stood up an organization called the Canadian Forces Information Operations Group, who was tasked with the conduct of key things in what we would now call cyberspace, but certainly did not at the time. That organization, commanded by a colonel, sat in the Information Management Chief Information Officer organization of our Canadian Armed Forces. And what we have found over the past 25 years is just the massive growth in the importance, criticality, and centrality of cyberspace to the conduct of military operations. That no less than obligated Canada to take that entity and promote it, and thankfully me as well, to a much more senior level of command to connect into the Canadian Armed Forces institution to ensure that cyberspace capabilities are appropriately integrated into Canadian Armed Forces operations. I will tell you that the successes that we have had working with Latvia and others were key lessons to our strategic leadership around the kind of benefits that can be gained when you operationalize cybersecurity, understand that cybersecurity is national security, and bring to bear all of the levers of power to address that problem. Happy to take more questions on Cyber Command a little bit later. I will dig in now to what I think the three key lessons that we've taken from our partnership of the past 2.5 years with CERT.LV. And they are, in no particular order, trust, trust, and trust. I mentioned yesterday, and I mentioned 2 years ago when I was on this stage, that as a community, we tend to be one that is slow to extend the hand of trust. Partially that's because culturally we are security people, and that is endemic to our world. But it is also because nationally we have responsibilities for some of our nation's most important treasures, whether those be the classified information that we protect or the privacy of our citizens. It is no small matter to embark on a detailed partnership with someone when those are the kind of equities that are at stake. But you can get there. And you can get there if you put the effort in, and you can get there from a couple of key things that I'll talk about in a second. One of the major observations is that if you want to build trust, the very first step is to be trustworthy. That sounds stupid, and I saw a couple of chuckles in the audience, but in many cases, it is just exactly that simple. It's pretty clear that we share an enormous overlap in our national interests, in our personal interests. There's a great foundation, we talked about it yesterday when we were talking about NATO, to build these kinds of relationships on. But I will tell you that, and I'll point directly at BB here, there's a special kind of relationship that develops when it's important to get back together halfway around the world because the opportunity strikes. So the fact that we find Canadian Armed Forces cybersecurity folks sat with BB in Japan having a conversation about what kinds of things will be next just speaks to that level of human interconnectivity, human interaction that lies at the heart of what sometimes you could mistake to be an entirely technical domain. So what else? That wasn't the only lesson. I joked that the 3 lessons were trust, trust, and trust. I actually have slightly different things written down on my page, and I'd like to highlight a couple of them. One of them is it's not about the tools. We often talk about the tools. Hey, look, we're technical people. In the end, we're going to need to run, install, bash, whatever you want, some kind of piece of software on a machine in order for us to do our business. But one of the things that we discovered is that 5 years ago, if you'd asked us, we would have said that our model is we build a stack of security appliances, we take it anywhere we want, we train to that, we know it extremely well. One of the things that we've found is, one, we didn't necessarily get the stack right, but two, it's more important to think about the individual networks that you're looking at. It's more important to think about the partners that you're working with. And frankly, as a cyber command, we're always working with a partner, whether that's an international partner, whether that's a national partner, or whether that's a partner piece inside the Canadian Armed Forces itself. So if it's not the tools, what is it? Well, I already talked about trust, but it's broader skill. It's an understanding about what the fundamentals are that we're aiming to achieve. And on that front, another lesson that we sort of took away is what I'll sort of briefly refer to as deep matters. It is way more effective to build a small number of deep and enduring partnerships than it is to attempt to partner with everyone. I've been warned, you know, Canada tends to think of itself as a small country. I'm not going to claim to be a small country in this audience, but certainly all of us face resource limitations that mean we need to focus. And as we focus, I think we need to take a broader look at who is best in order to support and work with whom, because we can't do everything. So, 5 lessons, if you will. Trust, 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 it's not the tools, and deep matters. One of the things that we had not embarked on when I last stood at this podium, it wasn't in this building, but 2 years ago at this event, was we were just beginning Canada's implementation of what we call our Indo-Pacific strategy. As a Pacific nation and an Atlantic nation, Canada has not necessarily put the same depth of focus historically into the Pacific. Clearly, with the emerging global situation, that's not right. So therefore, we released a strategy a couple years ago now that essentially said pay more attention to the Pacific. So we're doing that. That applies in terms of ship deployments and the like, but it also applies in cyberspace, and it applies to the things that Canadian Armed Forces Cyber Command are tasked to do. So as we began to look at partnerships in the Indo-Pacific region, we asked ourselves, who should we partner with? And how many people should we partner with? And how should we go about building those relations? And what I will tell you is that we certainly stepped off leveraging a lesson that we learned here. And I'm going to start with the last one first. Deep matters. It is more important to build a small number of deep and abiding relationships where you can actually work together, operate together, and share and communicate in a particularly deep way. I'm not going to outline all of our efforts, but I'll highlight on one sort of national effort in particular, and that's Japan. We embarked a year ago on, a little bit more than a year ago, it was late September, on really our first engagement with Japan in cyberspace, and from a military perspective, the first engagement ever. And over the past year, we've developed to the spot where we have now participated in some significant exercises in thoroughly integrated teams, and we are beginning to plan and look at what it might mean to operate together. So what got us there? Well, what got us there was a willingness to be trustworthy and to work deliberately on building the human interconnections and the human relationships on which trust is founded. We spent time not worrying too much about tools. We would leverage whatever tools collaboratively we figured would come to the fore. And I say that because probably the single most important tool that we found, the cyber defense magic key for us on exercise was actually a piece of translation software. It wasn't a piece of cybersecurity software at all. Because it turns out that if you've developed a degree of friendship, if you've developed a degree of trust within the organization, the kinds of things we need to communicate actually flow through automated machine translation okay. Oh, it really ends up sounding weird. It really looks weird on the screen. But the meaning is more than enough to be able to drive effective collaborative cyber operations. And then the last thing I would say that we leveraged from the lessons that we learned here into that was keeping an open mind. I genuinely believe that cyberspace is a domain that punishes the arrogant and rewards those that have just a little bit of humility. And it does that because the likelihood that anyone or any group of people have all of the right answers is vanishingly small. And here I want to loop back to sort of what I started with. If we had embarked on that set of operations 3 years ago instead of 2 years ago, if we'd embarked on that set of operations without the lessons that we learned operating with our Latvian colleagues at CERT.LV here, we would not have been anywhere nearly as effective. The fact that we are 12 months in fairly open conversations about getting to the most impactful things that we can do is very important. So I've used up well over half my time. I'm going to wrap up more or less there. I'm happy to take questions across just about any topic, but I'd like to end with sort of where I started, and that's with a thank you. Because I'd like to turn to CERT.LV again and say thank you for defending Canada. That may sound odd. CERT.LV's mission, of course, is to defend Latvian systems. But in defending Latvian systems, Canada gets measurably and directly better security. Why? Because we fundamentally believe in the principles of collective security. That's what NATO is founded on. That's what Canada's defensive strategy is founded on. To leverage I was about to say trite, but quite meaningful NATO statement. We are certainly stronger together. So with that, I will pause, turn to the moderator, and seek to earn my right to leave the stage by taking some of your questions. Thank you.
I thought you were going to say leave the stage with the right of taking your cyber socks.
Well, of course, everyone needs cyber socks.
Yeah, that's the thing we do here on the stage. Perhaps you have some questions in the audience, because you didn't post them online in our platform, which is, at some point you can see the code on the slides. Yes, there is a question. No. Okay, sorry.
There was.
Yeah, it's Datsam, and now I recognize her. I thought that's a very enthusiastic audience member, and it is, but not with the question. Yes, we have a question here in the first row, so perhaps we can have a microphone over here. Yes. It's here, yes. Varis has a...
Of course, it's Varis, so it's going to be a tricky question. I love it.
Let's prepare for that.
Yeah, Varis from CERT.LV. You mentioned being open-minded, being able to adapt to your partner is a key. I wonder how that works in the military, because usually military guys want to be very structured, sometimes even boxed in their procedures. How are you able to convince the military structure to adapt so effectively like Canada does?
Oh, what a great question. So it's not easy. You're right. That sort of mental flexibility, mental agility is not what our fundamental military doctrines point to. It's why we started with, here is the standard flyaway kit, here are the 6 pieces of software that every cyber operator will know and memorize, and after that we need to retrain if we get somewhere else. The answer is both simple and difficult. The answer to the question is that the one thing that militaries prioritize even more over conformity and standardization is success. When you can show that success is dependent on more flexible mindsets, it turns out that the people who are actually on the front end, the captains, the majors, the sergeants, the master corporals in our system, are not the ones that fully are bought into the need for standardization. Those needs come from elsewhere in the military. So we put a fair amount of effort into accepting that this is a little bit of a different space, that we need to train our operators and our cyber operators a little bit differently. They need to be empowered to think out of the box. I can tell you, I'm not so sure about the current task force commanders, but there have been previous task force commanders that felt very awkward being empowered to do things that were beyond sort of what was in the training curriculum. But it's a constant fight, but it is one of the fundamentals for how to succeed in cyberspace, where, frankly, if you have the doctrine written down, it is already out of date. If you have tactics, techniques, and procedures written down, they are already missing some key components. How do you build the workforce that is capable of working in that kind of environment? And the answer is, you educate it, you train it to think beyond sort of the standard easy pieces, and you expect and accept a degree of, I don't want to say failure is too harsh, but a degree of suboptimal output on your path to getting to good. So you're right, those are hard things for militaries to accept, but they're essential to be successful in cyberspace. So Cyber Command in Canada is established, at least in part, to give some power to the ability to drive forward some of these slightly different approaches in thinking. But great question. Oh, and BB's next.
Okay, BB's next.
Right.
It does work. It does work, yes.
Okay, now it works. BB, so this is more philosophical question, maybe also a strategic question. What is the role of cyber in the warfare? Do you foresee this as more as a only supportive role, or it's also something that you can deliver an actual impact in the current state of the affairs that we see globally?
Yeah, so I mean, I believe that all models are wrong, but some are useful. So the model of cyberspace as a domain of human endeavor and therefore a potential domain of warfare is quite useful. You know, the reality is that our societies and our militaries are fundamentally dependent on information communication technologies. Militaries are at their very core. The very Western way of war is fundamentally dependent on the IT systems that we've delivered to enable the precision that underlines it. Those systems are all vulnerable in cyberspace, so the necessity of defending them is very real. But our adversaries rely on these systems too. So they are equally dependent and equally disadvantaged when those capabilities are removed. Do I believe that cyber on its own independently can be a useful tool in warfare? Yes. Do I believe that cyber independently on its own can win wars? No. But to be honest, nor can air, land, or sea on their own on the modern battlefield. It's why joint has been the buzzword, not buzzword, has been the foundational principle of military doctrine for over 30 years, and you're beginning to see multi-domain operations, or in the Canadian context, what we call pan-domain operations, emerge as the fundamental intellectual underpinning of how modern war is fought and won. That means that cyber, alongside air, land, sea, space, and others, depending on your particular doctrinal constructs, are all necessary and essential for the conduct of warfare. And then I believe there's something else to cyber as well, something that I think we're still struggling with figuring out exactly where to put it, and that is the societal level threats that things like misinformation and disinformation can pose directly to nations and populaces. Yeah.
All right. You happy with the answer? Yeah. Very happy.
Thank you.
All right. If BB is happy, I mean, we're all good. All right. You know who BB is, by the way? Can you raise your hand if I say BB? You know who I'm talking about? All right. That's plenty enough.
Like, no one seems to want to raise their hand.
You're like a celebrity here. I mean, you should, start your Instagram or something. I mean, well, okay, cyber people are not on Instagram, I believe. So, any more questions? Yes. Can we pass the microphone, please? Could you stand up so we know who is asking question? Yes, and we have a microphone coming. Perfect.
My question is quite simple. How do you plan to address the problem of deepfakes?
Deepfakes?
Yes.
Deepfakes. So, I'm not the right person to get into in-depth technical capabilities. In the Canadian context of cyber capabilities and cyber warfare in particular, my remit is largely on the technical side. I sort of highlighted to BB the fact that I'm not quite sure how we handle these societal level threats where deepfakes definitely play a role. There is an emerging cat and mouse game between deepfakes and deepfake detection. Those are things that sort of we eagerly watch the outcome from. I think at a fundamental sort of underpinning for cyber warfare and cyber conflict, they are only one example of many of these cat and mouse pieces. I believe that AI or machine learning actually, is already at a place where it poses some similar kinds of challenges, either in the development of deepfakes or other things. And there are certainly other technology challenges that will come down the pipe that we will need to figure out how to integrate. I think, though, coming at this from a military background and a military perspective, these are all things that shape the tactics of future conflict rather than the battle space. None of these things are fundamentally game-changing, quantum perhaps, but we'll see. So there's no simple answer to that. The answer is technical solutions, education solutions, broader societal interventions, and similar kinds of things.
All right, I think this is it for now. Thank you, Dave, so much.
Okay, well, it was a real pleasure to be here. I salute once again the organizers. Canada thanks you, CERT.LV, for your defense of our country. Paldies.
And we thank Canada. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.